Hey everybody, this is Geoff Welch with This Tiny Empire, and I am excited today to have David Allen with me. Hi David, how are you?
Hi, Jeff. I'm fine, thanks.
So David Allen is the author of Getting Things Done, and it is a book that really changed my life in terms of the way that I thought about executing my work. And so I just want to kick it back to you, David, real quick. You wrote this book 2003, something like that?
2000, actually, I started it in '98,
Oh,
and
wow.
it got on the shelf in 2001.
So tell us a little bit, just the kind of the 2-minute synopsis of how you came to write the book, why you felt like it was something that the world needed.
Well, 25 years before, I began to uncover some of these techniques that actually just create clear space in your head, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm a sucker for clear space. And then also in my as I began a coaching and consulting practice, found that these techniques work for everybody, no matter what field they were in, no matter
Mm-hmm.
who they were, no matter what their personalities were. That when people started to apply this, they felt more things were more under control and more focused, and they had more room to focus on meaningful stuff. So that was sort of without exception, and then that became a core part of training and coaching and consulting business that I worked with, and in small little boutique versions of that for many years. And then at one point, I finally, as I say, it took 25 years to figure out that what I'd figured out was unique, and that nobody else seemed to have done that, and I
Mm-hmm.
better write the manual. So then I decided to put all that I had uncovered, and by that point, I had pretty much tested it in some of the hottest and most sophisticated and extreme, professional environments. So I knew it was bulletproof, that it could stand toe to toe with those kind of folks
Yeah.
and go viral inside of those. And that made me confident that, going ahead and writing it and putting my life work out in a book was safe territory and needed. And I never had
Yeah.
enough time to tell everybody all the ins and outs and whys and wherefores and implications and applications of all this. So I said, that'll be great to at least have a book to say, well, you can at least read the book.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the manual.
Yeah.
So when I read through it, I've read it a couple times over the years, but when I read through it the first time, the thing that I took away was it just seemed like advanced common sense. Like everything that you wrote in the book seemed like something that I should have been able to figure out, but never was ever going to figure out on my own. And so, if reading through this makes it seem like, oh, of course, this is the way that we should approach our projects and our tasks, why do you think that so many of us work contrary to that by default?
I actually don't know.
Well, that's a good answer.
My working hypothesis is that basically there's something quite counterintuitive about it.
Hmm.
It is common sense cognitively. It makes rational sense
Hmm.
that your head's for having ideas, but not for holding them. It wasn't designed to do that very well. But what's counterintuitive is that a lot of what this methodology is about is handling things that are not urgent or crisis in front of your face.
Sure.
It's handling all the things that the lack of handling them well starts to disrupt your ability to focus on the meaningful things with full consciousness.
Yeah.
So that's a bit counterintuitive, that you've got to stop just dealing with latest and loudest, and you actually need to work on your own process.
Yeah.
And work on having no backlog of unprocessed stuff, so that you're ready for change and surprise, as opposed to walking around with all this residue in your head. And though that makes common sense, and people nod their heads like you're nodding and going,
Hmm.
yeah, well, that makes total sense, but it is not a habit that most
Sure.
people have. And
Sure.
it takes quite a while to change it.
I find myself in the company of many busy people. I myself have a lot going on, not just because I have to have a lot going on, but because I'm interested in a lot of things, and I end up taking a lot of things on. And the idea of sitting down with this book for a few hours and reading it so that you can restructure the way you work to become less busy later, or perhaps less encumbered by the busyness, that's a tall order for some people. So what is kind of the area of greatest pushback you get from people who are skeptics of, so I've got to work this system, and I've got to spend time each week getting clear on what all my next actions are? What are the areas that you get the most pushback on?
I usually don't get a lot of pushback. By the time people get to me, they're already big fans.
Ah, that
They've
makes
already
sense.
got it. But I understand what you're saying,
Hmm.
and I think the general pushback is sort of what I alluded to before. Is people say, "Wow, it's not worth the time and effort that I need to put into that, because I have so many more urgent and important things I need to be dealing with,
Hmm.
and that my energy is better spent in dealing with that as opposed to working on a process. And I think, quite frankly, most people don't trust because they've never seen or had a model that really, really worked before.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a good bit of trust you'd have to invest in this to say, oh God, another one of those things that I'm never going to make work and that doesn't really work and that is overstructured and not really that functional. So I think you have to really taste it. You have to be willing to step into it, to engage with it. People often say, how long does it take to actually experience the value of this? I say about 20 seconds. You know, how long does it take to write down the top 10 things on your mind and then to decide the next action on each one?
Yeah.
Right. And you'll automatically, if you just did that, you would start to feel like you're back in the saddle and on top of your world again. So it does, you know, it is kind of strange and paradoxical that is such a common sense thing to do. And yet people just don't have the habit of doing it. It takes cognitive horsepower to do it. It's not something your brain automatically does.
Yeah.
So you're not born doing it. You didn't hop out of your mom and go, hi, Mom, what's the next action and what's the final outcome and who's accountable for that?
Yeah.
You know, that's a trained process where you actually have to train your cognitive capabilities. And it's a muscle you really need to develop.
Sure.
And you know, those things they take a while. And that's kind of I've just finished and we've just launched, has just been released a new edition of the Getting Things Done book. And one of the things that I wrote, that what's changed, or what's certainly what I've become aware of, is how long it takes for people to really digest and invest in and build these new behaviors.
Sure.
It takes 2 minutes to understand the model. It takes about 2 days to actually implement it, and it takes about 2 years to make it habitual if you really, really buy into it.
Yeah.
But there's no part of the model that doesn't work. You know, there are over 2 million copies of that book out there in 30 languages, and I've never had anybody say anything in there doesn't work. But everybody just says, gee, it all works. I just don't do it.
Yeah.
So I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There is a resistance, and it is kind of interesting to me that I guess I wouldn't have a job if this were easy to do.
Yeah, true. Well, and I know for myself that there are ebbs and flows with how well I execute my system, and when I'm not thinking clearly about my next actions, or when I've gone too long between reviewing things, there's that nagging sense in the back of your head that something is off in your world, and it's really is amazing what you talk about it in the book, that just making decisions without actually having done anything in the physical world, just making decisions about things changes your headspace
Sure.
greatly.
Well, you know, and one of the things that's also changed is we've really understood that getting things done and the whole GTD methodology is really a lifelong lifestyle process. Mm-hmm. I mean, how good can you get at parenting or gardening or cooking or chess or any of that? So, and if you're talking about the art and craft of managing the flow of life's work, that's a pretty awesome thing to actually engage in. Most people just work. They don't realize the art and craft of work itself. And that's what GTD really did, was start to build and recognize and make explicit the algorithm of what the work process really is. That requires, as knowledge workers, it requires us to actually have to think. And so it's really as much an installed thought process as it is any kind of tool or organizational system.
Yeah, I love it. You're somewhat famous for saying, the better you get, the better you better get. I think that's something that people listening to this are going to kind of smirk at a little bit and say, oh, but I wonder if you'd explain that a little deeper, what you mean by that.
Well, I'll back up a little bit and say it was kind of paradoxical and funny to me that the people who are most attracted to the methodology that I teach are the people who need it the least. Mm-hmm. It's the most productive people that are most interested in being more productive using this model. And that was kind of scratched my head for a few years until I finally realized, well, of course, what this methodology does is it relieves drag off the system and creates space. Well, who's most interested in getting rid of drag are the fastest people. Mm-hmm. Right? If you're not moving, if you're in your comfort zone, don't want to be somewhere different, or aren't stretched up against it, getting rid of drag may be a drag. You know, but it's the people that are really pushing up against it. It's the most productive people that are throwing themselves most out of control. Yeah. You know, so they take on bigger things. So, you know, it's the paradoxical thing that the better you get at this, the more confidence you're going to have to take on bigger and more incomplete and ambiguous stuff. Yeah. It's kind of like you know, at some point you sort of just get into the zen of the game and you go, okay, well, that's just the way the game is, and I know how to play the game. And it's like surfers. When, we are using an analogy now, like, good surfers always have an ankle tether. The ankle tether allows them to surf bigger waves. Hmm. And so the GTD is really like an ankle tether. It's like, as you mentioned, it's like, look, I go too long, I haven't reviewed my stuff, but you know how to catch up. Yeah. So it doesn't take you very long to sit down and actually get back there. Yeah. You pulled up the ankle tether and so got yourself back on the board again. Yeah. So GTD is really about building that model. And that it's the people who are moving who always who assume that 18 months from now their life is going to be more interesting or better or creative or richer than it currently is. Yeah. And that's the one common denominator, and there's not any others we've ever seen of people who take to GTD. That could be one 12-year-old and the next 12-year-old next to him doesn't get it. It could be one CEO and the CEO next to them doesn't get it. Yeah. So that's the only common denominator of people who are not necessarily moving fast, but moving in enriching ways. Yeah. Because for some people, movement for them is going to be slow down, smell the roses a bit more, and take the year off and go to Italy and write the book.
Well, and I love that you talk about that as well. That this is not just a mechanism by which we can do more and be constantly in motion, but it really is a mechanism by which we can make the best choice at any given time about what the next most important thing to do, and that there's no prescription for that other than us reviewing our options and making the best choice we can given our time, energy, and context. So
the big secret, Geoff, is it's not getting things done is not about getting things done. It's really about being appropriately engaged with your world. Mm-hmm. Right. So the degree to which you can be present in this conversation with me and I can be present with you is the degree to which you and I are appropriately engaged with everything else that we're not doing while we're talking to each other. Yeah. But you better know what that is. Yeah. So you can only feel good about what you're not doing when you know what it is. So getting your inventory clear of all the options and all the things you have made commitments about and being able to step back and review those on a consistent basis, it's not rocket science unless, of course, you're building rockets. But it is something that very few people have actually, gotten a grip on how many things they've actually committed to internally. Yeah. And then just making that an external thing and then building an external brain. And now the cognitive scientists are just validating, what GTD has validated for 30 years, which is basically your head's for having ideas, but not for holding them.
Yeah, that's great. So how do people get in touch with your work? I mean, is it just a matter of going to the bookstore and picking up a copy of your book? Is there a website you want to send people to? What's the best way to take the next step with GTD?
Yeah, all the above. I mean, the new book, the new edition of the book, I think is a great read, even if you've read Getting Things Done before, because though I didn't change hardly any of the methodology itself, the languaging and how we framed it and how we positioned it more as a lifestyle thing and not just for the fast track professional. Sure. Because I knew even when I wrote the first edition of this, that it was equally valuable for 10-year-old kids in school, as well as the clergy, as well as stay-at-home dads, as well as anybody. Mm-hmm. But it was really positioned, and the word productivity has a bit of baggage around it, like business and busyness, as opposed to just simply achieving desired experiences or results. So it's reframing that and repositioning it so that I think there's an enriched sort of viewpoint that is available in the book itself. The new book is not yet out in audio, so if you like to listen to it, you might need to wait for that. But there's 3 additional chapters, and again, I've sort of reframed some of the vocabulary to sort of understand some of the deeper and wider aspects of what this is about and the implications of it. So that's certainly one way to do it. Our website, gettingthingsdone.com. has a lot of free stuff on there, a lot of ways, a lot of pathways in there that you could explore and check that out. So those are probably the 2 of the most easy ways to step in.
Good. Well, thank you so much for your time, David. I know that I'm in Alaska, you're in Amsterdam, and our time zones are not exactly right next to each other. So I appreciate you making the time for me at kind of an odd hour. And I just thank you for your work. I'm sure you know this, but it makes a difference for people, and it is making the world a better place. So I appreciate you putting it into the world.
Thanks, Geoff. Thanks for the opportunity to share it.
All right. Have a great day, David.
You too.